Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to be looking at some grammar stuff today from ESL Radius.
Yep.
We're going to be looking at adjective agreement. And
Sounds good.
yeah, so this is something that I think a lot of English learners struggle with.
Yeah.
And it can be kind of a tricky topic, but once you get it down, it's really going to make your English sound a lot better, a lot more natural.
Yeah, definitely.
So
More fluent.
yeah, more fluent.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
What is adjective agreement? How would you explain that?
Well, I think the first thing to mention is that in English,
Right.
adjectives don't really change.
Okay.
So unlike some other languages, like for example in Spanish,
Right.
adjectives have to agree with the noun in gender and number.
Okay.
So if you have a feminine noun, you have to use the feminine form of the adjective.
Okay.
And if you have a plural noun, you have to use the plural form of the adjective.
Okay.
In English, it's a lot simpler.
Okay, so that's good news for us.
Yeah. It is good news.
So we don't have to learn all these different...
Yeah, you don't have to memorize different endings for adjectives based on whether the noun is masculine, feminine, singular, or plural.
Oh,
So
sure.
for example, if you have the adjective big, you can say one big car or two big cars,
Right.
and the adjective stays the same.
So it's consistent.
Exactly. It's consistent.
Okay. So then where does the agreement come in?
The agreement comes in with what we call determiners.
Oh, okay.
So determiners are words like a and this, that, these, and those.
Okay.
And these words have to agree with the noun in number.
Okay.
So if you have a singular noun, you have to use a singular determiner.
Okay.
Like, for example, a blue tree. But if you have a plural noun, you have to use a plural determiner like the blue trees.
So the adjective is like the star,
Yeah,
and then the determiner is kind of like the supporting actor that
exactly.
has to agree.
It has to agree with the star.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So why is this important? Why should I care about this as an English learner?
Well, it's important because if you don't use the correct determiner, it's going to sound strange to native speakers.
Right.
It's one of those things that might not be a huge mistake,
Right.
but it's
Yeah.
just going to make your English sound a little bit off.
Less natural.
Yeah, less fluent.
Okay, cool.
So it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah, and so I guess a lot of English learners, they probably know
Yeah.
what the adjective is. They know what the noun is.
Right.
But they maybe aren't sure which determiner to use.
Exactly. And that's where the confusion comes in.
So are there any like common pitfalls or common mistakes
Yeah.
that English learners make?
There are definitely some common mistakes, and that's something that we're going to be talking about more in detail
Oh, awesome.
in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, well, we'll be right back after a quick break. Welcome back to the deep dive. We were talking about common pitfalls.
Right. Yeah. Common mistakes that English learners make when it comes to adjective agreement.
Right. And so you're going to give us some examples.
So let's imagine you're at a bakery
Okay.
and you see a display of delicious pastries.
Yeah.
You might say, I'd like to try that delicious pastry.
Okay.
But what if you wanted more than one?
Right.
You would have to say, I'd like to try those delicious pastries.
So that changes to those,
Exactly.
but the delicious stays the same.
Exactly. And that's because the adjective delicious is already describing the pastries.
Right.
Whether it's one or many.
Okay.
So the adjective doesn't need to change.
So it's really just that determiner.
It's the determiner, yeah.
Okay.
That has to agree with the noun and number.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about,
So another example
Okay.
could be describing a friend's car.
okay.
You might say, wow, that's a cool car.
Okay.
But if your friend has multiple cool cars, you would say, wow, those are cool cars.
Right.
Again, the adjective cool stays the same.
Okay.
It's just the determiner that changes
Gotcha.
from that to those.
Okay. To agree with the plural noun cars.
That makes sense.
So it's really all about paying attention to that determiner.
Right. So it seems like the biggest mistake would be just like forgetting to change the determiner.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a very common mistake,
Okay.
especially for learners whose native languages
Yeah.
don't have this kind of agreement.
Right. Right.
So, for example, you might hear someone say, a beautiful trees,
Okay.
instead of those beautiful trees.
Okay.
And that's because they're just not used to having to change
Right.
that determiner.
Gotcha.
It's a small mistake,
Right.
but it can make your English sound a little bit less fluent.
Yeah. Less natural.
Yeah, less natural.
And I think a good tip for people listening
Yeah,
is
I was just going to say,
to really pay attention
that's a great tip.
to how native speakers are talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like if you're watching a TV show
Yeah.
or listening to a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
Just pay attention to how they're using those
Yep.
determiners.
Oh.
And you know
And
what?
you'll start to pick it up.
You can even make a game out of
Oh,
it.
that's fun.
You know, like if you're watching a movie
Yeah.
and you hear someone say a sentence with an adjective and a noun,
Mm-hmm.
see if you can identify the determiner
Right.
and whether it's correct or not.
Yeah, that's a good way to practice.
It's a fun way to practice, yeah.
Yeah, and ESL Radius, they have
They have so many great resources.
they're good examples of this, right?
They do. They have lots of examples of
Okay.
the adjective agreement.
So if you want to like really dive deep
Yeah.
into this topic,
Go check them out.
they have a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Mm.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about these determiners and adjectives.
Yeah.
So how can people listening practice this? Like, what are some good ways?
Well, one fun exercise is to take simple sentences and switch them from singular to plural.
Okay.
So, for example, you could start with the sentence, I see a red bird, and then change it to, I see two red birds.
Okay.
Pay attention to how the determiner changes from a to two,
Right.
while the adjective red stays the same.
Okay.
You can do this with all sorts of sentences.
That looks good.
Describe the things you see around you.
Uh-huh.
Use both singular and plural nouns.
I like that. And so once people start doing that, then they can kind of get a feel for
Exactly.
when to use which one.
Yeah, you start to develop that intuition
Right.
for which determiner to use in which situation.
Yeah.
And it becomes more natural.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, any final words of wisdom for the listeners out there who are trying to master adjective agreement?
Just remember that every step you take in your English language journey is a step towards greater fluency and confidence.
That's good.
So don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
The more you practice, the better you'll get.
Right. And everybody makes mistakes.
Everyone makes mistakes.
It's part of learning.
Absolutely.
And don't forget to check out ESL Radius for more
Yeah, great resource.
tips and examples and
Tons of information.
all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been another great deep dive
It has been fun.
into the world of grammar.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.